Yeah.
And so I felt bad, but I was like, he's gotta do it. I was like,
Yeah.
Every time I said.
exactly. I mean, these are creative. But I get to know, it's tracks are like, you know, if you want to, I would like to. You start studying, here you go. I'll be signing for you. When I did. Okay. I don't know, 2017 or 18. Yeah. And how you evaluate. This is actually scared to write something down. Like, yes, that's a good idea. I think Dave would be fine, because they'll in a great position. See, I write for this clearly. That'll do me a disservice in this case.
All right, everybody, thank you for being here. We are going to start with the slight delay. We're going to go ahead and get started, call the meeting to order and start with our roll call.
I know the parking out there was a little bit tricky. I think we have quorum, so. And the continuing saga of please don't forget to get your flu shot continues with me. So my apologies again. Okay, Alan.
Here.
Danford.
Here.
Bergiel.
Here.
Boyd.
Here.
Brock. Luzon.
Here.
Karamanic. Chang.
Yeah.
Colley. Council.
Here.
Cuomo.
Here.
Doms.
Here.
Davis. Dutt.
Here.
Dyer. Elias.
Here.
Ellison.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Griffin.
Here.
Hadley. Hampton. Hart.
Here.
Hildebrand.
Here.
Jansen.
Here.
Yara Pasnino.
Here.
Kazim.
Here.
Khan.
Here.
Lee. Maggiano.
Here.
Matthews.
Right.
Mendes. Moon.
Here.
Morales. Ofoe.
Here.
Peralta. Perry. Riker.
Here.
Roberts.
Here.
Ruffin.
Here.
Song.
Here.
Shepherd.
Here.
Brace yourself. Shellnut.
Here.
I know. Okay. Finally, the correct spreadsheet. Shin.
Here.
Sticiano.
Here.
Swift.
Here.
Talbot. Viswanath. Webb. No. Wentz.
Here.
Yang. Yarbrough.
Great, so December minutes approved electronically, so we can go ahead and start with our administrator reports. And if you're ready, we can start with the president.
Everyone. Great to be back here. Happy New Year. And welcome to the spring semester. Hope it has started off well for all of you. So I do want to start with the presidential search. I know many of you are curious. I don't know when the profile is coming out, unless Dylan, you have information on that. Do you want to say something about it? And then I'll
I
add.
planned on it, but I can, so,
Yeah, maybe you can tell since you're on the committee. Maybe
yeah,
you
so
can-
I'll fast forward a little bit. The profile, my understanding, which is basically the job description, is the best way to understand what that is. That was developed with the feedback that was gathered from listening sessions and that was submitted onto the web form. That, my understanding, is done and was supposed to be shared with the committee this week. The week is technically over, so maybe that will happen. We're essentially in the recruiting candidates phase. My understanding is I was told that's gonna last for, we should expect a couple months for the recruitment phase to continue, and we probably won't have a lot of updates during that time period. I was told to strongly convey that everybody is still strongly encouraged to continue with the nominations. If anybody continues to come to mind, that nomination link is still live. It just pops up an email address. Please continue to nominate candidates. So that's essentially where we are.
Yeah, thank you. Any other general questions for Dylan? And I just want to add something. Okay. So what I wanted to add to it was that I know many of you have asked me, will I be applying for this position? And I have been saying no, because I had the chancellor told me that, I would not be candidate for the position. Recently, he did tell me that if I wanted, I could apply. I haven't 100% decided yet, but he did leave the door open for me to apply. And normally I would not share anything about whether I'm applying for a job or not. But the reason I am is because I have vehemently told everyone earlier that I will not be applying. So I felt like I should, since the chancellor did open the door for me and many of you have asking me and I don't want to lie. So I thought I'll tell you that I am thinking about, I haven't seen the job ad. So maybe I'll see the job ad and it'll say, you can't be over 5'8", and then I won't apply. So, so I will see the job ad and see if it fits with, what I want to do. Then I may apply. So just wanted to tell you that, again, because many of you, meet me and ask me and so I thought I'll just say that here. I won't be, of course, sharing anything else. We'll go through the process and also just to assure you all, I mean, this is only about, that I'm permitted to apply. This is nothing to do with the search process is standard. It's moving forward. We have the search committee. It doesn't change a thing. Whether or not I apply, the search process will be the same. So just wanted to tell you that it's the only thing that may change is whether or not I apply. But otherwise, the search process is as it is. We have a search committee. The search committee chooses candidates, then sends it to the board, and then the Board of Regents interviews along with the chancellor, and then they pick a finalist. That's how the process is for. So let me see if anyone has any questions on that, or in general, anything on the search process. All right. So moving on to and again, just to I won't be sharing any more details with anyone. So so as the process goes through, so this will be the only thing I'll say on the process. And of course, the search process is confidential, so I don't think you would hear anything else from me or from anyone in the search committee or whatever. Just wanted to make that clear. Now, in terms of, we've had a good start. So first, if you have not heard, our cheer team, which already has 29 national championships. We just had the national championship in Orlando. And they swept all titles. We had 3 main titles and won a 4th stunt one. And we won all the titles. So can we have a round of applause for the cheer team? We have 32 national, I mean, among all our athletes. And if you just Google and you may see some of the routines, they are tremendous athletes and way above any of the competitors in the country. So please, if you have any students in your classes, be sure to congratulate them. This is a huge deal. And I'm trying to see, kind of I'll be meeting with them or whatever. I'll try to see how we can honor them at our level. But I just wanted to say it is a huge national level deal, and it's being covered in the media and so on. So just wanted to make sure that everyone is aware, and please do congratulate the team, any members you may have in your classes. We have had also a good start in terms of our overall enrollments, like what our retention from fall to spring. Our retention is similar to what it was last year. I think it's about fall to spring is about 92%. So it's roughly the same. It's not great. It can be better because fall to spring, we want kind of everyone to stay. But at least we are maintaining that level. We do have in general, and I've talked about undergraduate. I'm concerned about, that's been my focus, right? Getting in undergraduate students, making sure we retain them and then helping them graduate. And we don't do well on this entire path, which means they start and we don't get enough undergraduate students. And then our retention rates, although they've lately become a bit better the last couple of years, but we're lagging behind on that while they're here, kind of related to our comprehensive sector. And third is graduation, and we lag there as well. So we're kind of lagging right from entry point to what happens here to what happens at the graduation stage. And I've already talked with you about these things. What I want to stress is that these kind of things become even harder in the spring. Okay, so usually every year, and we don't have the final numbers for spring yet, but in general, there's about a 10% melt between fall and spring. So even the numbers I've shared with you earlier are worse off in the spring. What I shared with you in the fall, those are our best numbers for the year. Okay, spring gets even worse, which also means that, I've talked about not just the undergrad chain, but how few people in that chain actually are on our campuses, right? So, I've talked about, for example, since 2018, the number of students who are truly on campus taking on-person classes is half. Okay, it's half what we used to have. Because even the little growth we've had, like this past year, we did have a small growth in undergrad, which was good news, but it was like, I think 0.6%, something like that. It was a very small growth, but our online percentage actually went up, which means more of our freshmen enrollees were online. I think it was 30-some%. So we are still struggling with, and again, we want to maintain the online. I've said this earlier, and just to stress that, we do want the online students, undergrad, grad, we don't want to lose them because Georgia is also a net loser, even in the online space. So we don't want to be that, we want to keep these students in-house. But at the same time, I have stressed that to maintain the culture of the place, to maintain, everything that we have here and utilize our housing and dining and so on, we need a core group. And that core group doesn't have to be like 14,400, which is our overall enrollment. But it'll have to be a few thousand students for us to have the culture, for us to have students in our housing and dining and so on. And so that is an issue in the fall. And what I'm saying here is that in the spring, it becomes an even bigger issue because we have some other melt that happens from fall to spring. So that's something for you to kind of keep in mind in terms of as you're teaching your classes and how we can do more hand holding and look out for any warning signs that you may see for our students who may be at risk of stopping out. Because once they stop out, it's very, very hard to bring them back on. We're trying that. We're making efforts on that too. But it's very expensive to go out and look for those students and then tell those students, hey, you need to come back. So please, kind of, in your classes, just make sure, if people need help, and it may not be from it may be financial aid, it may be other things. But if you see those red warning signs, please let us know so that we can have the appropriate team reach out to them, because you're the ones who are closest to them. You're the ones they may have issues in housing or something, and they may just casually talk with you. But even from those casual conversations, if you get some sense, please share that with us. That is important, because we're trying to do everything we can to keep them here. It's always easy to keep the students we have. That's why retention is a big deal. Retention is a much bigger deal than enrollment, because retention is like almost 70% of our students are the ones we, who we carry forward. And so they are the ones, if we can just keep the ones we have, we wouldn't have to struggle to get every new student, right? So I mean, it's very expensive to get every single new student. It's much cheaper to keep someone here. So we always have that in mind when we're trying to help out students. We've talked about, some changes in the spring semester, starting from the spring semester, one of them, and our provost has talked with you earlier about how can we have more in-person classes. And I don't know, we are getting good responses from some departments, not all, but some departments are giving good responses. And because we honestly have students in our housing who are here, who are living here, and who are like, I'm not getting the classes and I don't know why I'm staying here. Which then means not only we lose them from our classes, but we lose somebody in housing, we lose a meal plan, we lose a spectator for athletics, right? So it's kind of it's many different things that we lose at once every time we lose one single student. So whatever you can do to kind of offer them those in-person classes. And then we've also done a series of other things this semester, and I've talked about doing them, and then now they have been accomplished. One of them was having our East Commons, opening it up for dinner. And that was a big problem last semester. It was discontinued in the fall, and many of our students were complaining. To be honest, from an economic standpoint, that made sense because our West Commons D6 was earlier, it's actually big enough to accommodate the small undergraduate population we have. But then many of our dorms, our residence halls are close to East Commons. And so it was inconvenient. And East Commons itself is not enough to take all students. So now we have opened both. Again, it's a big investment. But as I've said earlier, my approach is, we're struggling on discount for undergraduate students. Let's make a huge, big push. Let's make some investments because that's important for our culture. That's important for the, sustainability of this institution. And if in 2-3 years, we feel like we're failing or the market is tough and they aren't coming back, then we do need to reduce the footprint. Because one thing I've realized is our, what we spend on facilities, on maintaining our buildings, your offices, everything. I mean, it's very, very expensive. I mean, anytime like one of the investments we made, and work has already started on it, is on the HVAC for Centerpoint and the Oaks, $2.6 million. And that's not even an entirely new system. An entirely new system would be $10 million. Okay, that gives you a sense of these are 2 residence halls and their air conditioning system, if I got brand new, is a $10 million investment. And what we're doing is we're getting some components and we're kind of, making do, but even that was $2.6 million. That's the biggest investment I've made. I heard about a transformer in a building. We get kind of, from the electric power grid, we get power at high voltage and then we step it down. And it was like some $300,000, right? So this is like for a transformer for one, I think it was for downside or something. So it was like for one thing. So these are the kind of, that's the kind of money it takes to maintain a building, not to mention the daily wear and tear and all the operation expenses. And we have others, and we're making trade-offs like the Alfred building. By the way, one good news, in the governor's budget, we do have the governor, broadly, the way it works is the governor sets out a budget and it's this the total amount, and then the House and Senate work to see if they want to move money here and there. But that kind of sets the starting point of this is the money we have, and these are my priorities. So if the governor does not put something in there, then then someone in the House and Senate has to introduce those for us. And one important thing for us was for the Pafford building. So usually we get money in 3 steps. The first one is the design, then it's construction, and the third step is I think they call it fixtures, equipment, FFE. Is it fixtures? Fixtures, furniture, and equipment. That's what it is, FFE. So that third step was money. We, the state had told us earlier that we could move forward, but then they release money in phases. If they don't have money, they could say, "Oh, we'll do this next year." But we were fortunate. It's, it is there, and our government relations, always does a good job in kind of following up and making sure money stays there. And so it is in the governor's budget, and that's good. That's good news. But I also wanted to say, like, for that building, we got a lot of money in 3 phases, but still there is money. There's work to be done on HVAC and so on, which we could not do from that, and that'll have to be done in a couple of years. So anytime we have buildings, offices, classrooms, anything we have, right? I mean, it feels good to have a new building, but then what it takes to maintain it is huge. So all of this to say that, we try to fill up our spaces, and we have some beautiful, beautiful spaces. I think we have great spaces. This is a lovely campus, great to showcase. We'll have another showcase for students this Saturday that I'll be going to, and we love to show off our buildings and our spaces. But I do think that, again, they have to be filled with students and faculty and staff, and they have to be here. Otherwise, all of these things are very expensive to maintain. So we have, so again, the HVAC, we have moved forward with that. Work has started. It'll be by this fall, we should be in good shape for these 2 buildings, Center Point and Oaks. We also have, if you haven't been to the UCC, in the where the food area is, see some new flooring and lighting, and it looks much nicer. If you go to the top floor, you will see a ping pong table and some other recreation things for students, which again hopefully creates more energy, and we can have students come in. If you go to our bookstore, I don't know if you've tried the heirloom donuts yet. They are great. We were thinking of having kind of like a full store, but there were some issues with heirloom donuts, and it was also expensive. So this is a much cheaper option where they're delivering donuts for us, and we'll try it out, and hopefully that'll be one more way to pull in not just students and faculty, but also the entire community, right? So I mean, one thing I've realized here which I realized pretty soon was, kind of how much we are connected with the community here. And just yesterday, John Preston and I were in 2 events for the county in chamber, and it was one in the morning, one in the evening, and they're all really connected, really invested in the institution, because they realize that the economic development of the whole region is driven by us. In case you didn't know, the University of West Georgia last year contributed $614 million to the economy of this region. Okay, so we had a big employer, we had a big contributor to this economy, and it's not just one is at the broad level of, like I said, overall economic impact of the institution, but also if you look at the individual impact we're having, we are, according to U.S. News and World Report, we are third in the state on social mobility, which basically factors in students with Pell Grants and so on, and how much we're adding value, especially to economically disadvantaged. So that's, I think, something really we should be really proud of that. I've also told you the number 1.4 million, which is how much more money you make over a lifetime if you do a degree from UWG versus if you don't have a degree. So we have lots of these great, kind of outcomes. But again, these outcomes happen for students who graduate, right? And I've talked earlier about how we really struggle on that, because it's almost 2 out of every 5 students who graduate within 6 years, not 4, right? So, but if they do graduate, if they do persist, if we are able to retain them, then they have great futures and they contribute to themselves, their families, the economy of the region, our workforce. Our employers keep asking us, they need people in X area and Y area and so on. But all of that happens when they graduate. So if you do have these students who you see struggling and so on, realize that every single student makes a huge difference while they're here in tuition and dining and energy and culture and so on. They make a huge difference once they graduate. The economy of this region to our workforce, because our employers don't care how many students we're getting in. They care how many are we graduating. And we are graduating plenty, right? So last year, we had about 4,000 or so students. And so we are graduating more, but as a percentage of what we should be, we're not there yet. So please do, I'm saying all of this just to stress kind of the value of every single student. So if you see any red flags, please see what you can do to either take care of it yourself or refer to someone else. Also use these talking points. Tell them, hey, I know you're struggling with this, but keep in mind, it's a $1.4 million deal. And you don't want to go for a short term, I'm getting $10 an hour now. For the long run, this is what it means. And of course, not to mention all the other intellectual value of studying here, right? So, but this is what it means even economically for you. This is what it means for uplifting families. And we are very good at that, especially if you're economically disadvantaged. We are very good at that. So have those, have those kind of talking points for them so that you can keep persuading them to stay. And because it will happen, we can do all we want at the administrative level, but honestly, I mean, you are the ones who's spending the most time with students. So the more you can chat with them, talk to them about their issues, refer them to whatever the right place may be, whether it's financial aid or something else, that'll go a long way. That'll go a long way because it's again, one student at a time. None of this happens we can look at aggregate outcomes of retention, whatever, but all of the work is happening one student at a time. So that has to come from academics, that has to come from all this, having good residence halls, good dining places, having good recreation places, or D1 athletics, of course. Anything we can do to tell them that this is a great place to be in, especially if you come in person, right? That's our message. This is an awesome place to join, and especially if you join here in person, that's even better, right? And we want everyone, but that in-person component is critical as well. I want to say, just like I said, we're fall to spring retention is stable. It's not, we haven't exceeded where we were last year, but I'll tell you, just a month ago, we were really trailing on that, and our enrollment teams and academic affairs did a great job of pulling them back in, seeing who has holes. Again, it's one student at a time work to see how we can keep every single student. So now we're kind of at par with where we were. Our credit hours are up for both undergrad and grad. A lot of it is dual enrollment, which is always, it's a double-edged sword because dual enrollment students, we don't get to keep all of them, right? We get about 25-30% of them who stay, but then they're also good students whom we want. So again, if you have dual enrollees in your class, just give them special attention because those are the students we really need, and we've done really well. And John and our enrollment folks and everyone, they've done a really good job of reaching out to schools. Our school districts are happy. It's strategically from a community standpoint also is very beneficial for us. It's not just like getting the students. It's kind of having that presence where they feel that, okay, this is our university. So we are doing a pretty good job at that. And that is helping us with the credit hours. But again, we could lose them as quickly as they come in. So if you can make even a small, increase in the number of dual enrollees we keep, that'll make a huge impact, not just in our enrollment quantity, but also the quality. Because these are, they're coming for dual enrollment from high school, so they're good students, right? So, so whatever you can do at your level, in your classes, in your departments, to have these in-person classes and so on, would be welcome. So let me pause here and see if I can take any questions. Yes, please.
When I teach most of first year writing for context, so I see a lot of first.
Yeah, you teach first year.
Writing.
Yeah.
So a lot of first year students, a lot of dual enroll. And I really appreciated hearing things about the dining hall changing and the air conditioning, because I hear that come up in class a lot and try to share out when I can. But that's been sort of an informal process of like talking before and after class, getting feedback and then passing it to my chair. I wonder if, of course, keeping up that kind of relationship, I think is positive and works in the direction that you're kind of speaking to here. But do you also feel like there may be something worthwhile to more formally collecting survey data from students in our class? Not necessarily about our class, but like asking them to fill out a Qualtrics form or something like, what's the biggest barrier to you right now, or something like that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I know in the past they have, and I have raised this as a marketing professor. I love surveys. But I also know that respondents sometimes get, our students, they don't, I mean, honestly, they often don't even see emails.
Right, so I wonder if they come from faculty that people are willing to.
Like if faculty were persuading them to take, I think we could, we've had those conversations, and one of it has been like, they, how much we burden the students, because honestly, for the barriers, we know that. I mean, I don't think a survey is going to tell us anything else except I need in-person classes, I need financial aid, or I need residence halls where, which that don't have these problems. So because students do, I meet with students all the time, all of us meet students with all the time. So I don't think there's any mystery to kind of, what those issues are. At the same time, it's always good too, because sometimes you may be hearing from only the ones who are complaining and who and not the students in general. So there is definitely some benefit in having these kind of surveys. So I've had this conversation, and like I said, I've been in two minds on whether we, the other issue with doing surveys is like you do a survey and something comes up, and our student body will be like, okay, what came up? Okay, what did you do? Right. So it's like, then it becomes like, which I'm sure all of us as faculty and staff also sometimes feel. It's like, hey, you asked us for feedback, and then what did you do? So, so I think that's something else, like we need to be ready to deliver that. And again, for example, in-person classes, I know there are lots of constraints, like you understand this, all of you do, but then it's other things like, hey, they don't want to have these classes or whatever else. So that's why I've been vacillating on this, but I definitely get your point that we could to get more feedback. Yes, please.
Along those same lines, because I was having a really similar thought, actually, and my students will do backflips for bonus points, so if I put a quiz on there that is very, short and to the point about what barriers they have, and they know that they're getting some kudos, then they'll be happy to do it. I think part of the thing that might get at the mystery part of what you're talking about, which is the difference between what's happening potentially here versus similar institutions, would be to make sure that that data then gets binned in important ways by which students ended up leaving. Because if we ran something like that concurrently or in some standardized fashion, then we could do sort of after the fact analysis on the people, what did the people say who ended up leaving? Specifically, that pool of people will help us a bit more with the stuff that don't.
Or were there early warning signs?
Yeah.
That we should have caught earlier? Yeah, all right, I think we'll have, maybe we can, John, maybe we can have more of a discussion on with Ken on what kind of, yes.
And that leads back to a question I wrote down some time ago. Is there any, I know it's tricky, but is there any follow-up communication that happens between the university and the students you're losing? It's like a text follow-up. Hey, we missed you this semester. Can you inform us what's going on in your life that did you leave or something like that? Or is that too tricky to do if they're not actually like still involved?
Yeah, good. I'll tell you what I know, and maybe John will have to add. I know that anytime someone, doesn't pay for a certain semester, there's like 3 different levels at which you are 3 standard steps we have to like, hey, you haven't paid, or like, hey, what's, and then towards the end, like, why are you leaving? But honestly, what happens in many of these cases is that they just, once they're moved, they just stop communicating, right? So a lot of it is like, they just leave, or they're thinking, oh, this semester, I'm just doing this. I found this great work, and I'll be back in the summer. But as we know, they leave once, and then it's very hard to pull them. They get used to the money, they get used to other things, and then they feel like, another great talking point I think we should all use is, because people think of money, oh, I was 3.0, I lost my scholarship, and now it's not worth my while. I think students don't realize that the main investment they're making is time. The money investment is nothing, right? But if you're in-state, you're paying like, let's say 30,000 over 4 years, and you're getting a 1.4 million, you're getting like a 40 times ROI, right? On what you're doing. So I think.
Here now is louder than the future.
Exactly, yeah. I've done some work on time discounting. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, so it is, but the now looms more, but I feel like sometimes if you tell people, hey, you're getting like 40-45 times more for every dollar you invest. This is like, this is the best investment you can make. So think about time. Yes, if you can't invest your time or your family obligations, so on, I mean that's, but it does hurt me when I see that because somebody has to pay $500, and they're like, oh, they stopped this. Now I have to take on my own $500. It's not worth my while. I'm gonna quit. Because to me, that's like they don't realize how much they're leaving the table. Do you have any information on anything else?
Yeah, and I think this connects with the question about the Engage West survey that came up, at our last faculty senate meeting. HR is looking into that, but I love the idea of polling and asking students, what matters to you and what might move you closer or further away from staying at UWG. I'll share that, we had some snow or maybe snow, possible snow, very cold days. 2 rounds of this, and in the first, it was right before we were, scheduled to start classes. And I commend everybody for all of the scrambling, in the midst of dealing with lives outside. Advising and program coordinators did a phenomenal job. We had 256 students who were eligible but hadn't registered for spring. And we ran those campaigns really starting in December, but carrying all the way up until the start of the term. We reclaimed about 1/3 of those, but there were 44 that said, I'm out, I'm leaving. And following up with them and saying, to Ashwani's point, maybe they're just out, they're not going to respond. But to say what mattered, what made the difference. And some of that we can control, some of it we can't. But for those items that we can control, let's address them.
Other thoughts? Yes, please.
This is a little bit off subject, if that's okay. I'm not really very well informed, unfortunately, about the Maples Street grant that went through and the specifics of the plan. But I was wondering if we as an institution have any plans for sort of collaborative projects with the town towards emphasizing this new sort of corridor for students to access downtown and for
Yeah.
all the
So
other.
this is the Maple Street corridor, where like we have that rail line and stuff. There's gonna be, a new stretch of road. They're also talking to other people on investments to make on both sides on basically cleaning it all up, making it, I think it's gonna be a phenomenal thing for us, especially given the in-person focus because that's our gateway to the University of West Georgia. And at this point, it's not, many parts are really worn down. So that is something. So yes, the answer to your question is I have been part of those meetings with the mayor and others. And we are partners on that. It's, I think the grant was $9.4 million or something that they got, $9.7 million. It is a big grant. It's not something where you won't see asphalt on the streets this month, but because it takes a long time, it's a federal grant to kind of work with them and we have a small city office too, right? So, we have some good people there, but it's a small office, so it'll take time to kind of, I think they've done a phenomenal job securing this grant. And from what I've, come to know, it's not that it just happened. It wasn't like they got lucky. There were investors and others who were already keen on revamping the whole thing. So they had kind of the proposal ready. And so when the opportunity came in, they applied and they got it. So we're really delighted with that and definitely partners. It's not something in which, we are not making any investments ourselves. And honestly, they know and they have told us that we don't kind of in terms of our facade and stuff, it's the good part of the street, right? So so we do a good job maintaining it. But it is something which we're in talks with the city. I've also had a couple of meetings with some developers who are like, thinking maybe we'll have a bowling alley and so on, and we'll do this and so that we can use it as a selling point for our students and say that, hey, this is not just West Georgia, this is like the whole community is thriving and this is the right place to be in. So yes, we are in close coordination on that and very excited about that grant. Yes.
Do not have a question, do not have a request, but I will make a comment in the light of the conversation that we just had. I arrived at West Georgia in the year 1994. And in the past almost 31 years, what has changed is that it used to be very easy to have students find a common time for problem solving or working in a research lab. If I try to do that, I find that students often say they have to go to work. And so, although I have not done a marketing survey, I can estimate that the fraction of students who are working to pay their bills has increased significantly between 1994 and now. Now, I invite students, especially my own majors, to have conversations about careers, and I put it to them this way. Different time, different days, my parents paid for my education. My first job was graduate school. And I say that having a student loan is actually not a bad thing because it is not a frivolous expense. And I make the same argument that you have done economically, that if one graduates a year sooner and makes twice the amount of money, the student loan pays for itself.
That's right.
I often find that students are averse to taking any loans at all. And so the question that one finds is that how does one, other than showing compassion, how does one find a way to work with a student who misses deadlines, gets a 0 in the grade book, and suffers in their grade book?
I think that is a great point. And we have, like a couple of enrollment folks about when they're trying to help on financial aid, and if you're unsuccessful, then of course they will talk about loans and things. I would also say that there is also, although University of West Georgia does not have that issue, but as you know, there's also a huge debt problem in the nation. I mean, I don't know what the latest numbers are. I remember a couple of years ago, I'd seen the numbers. I think the student debt was maybe $1.8 trillion. Okay, it's a like massive. So I don't know the latest numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if it has gone up. And so because of issues like that, we do have some programs, like one in the state is what's called No More Borrow Less. So which is be aware of, like, you know, what is a grant, what is a scholarship, what is a loan, and so on, right? Have like financial knowledge about things. But at the same time, like you said, I think if people are responsibly borrowing, and they have that, especially if you're towards the later parts of your program, and you know this is gonna, you know, like the comment you made, like, you know, because if it's far away, then you kind of, you know, you're discounting the money you're making 4 years from now. But if you know I'm going to be graduating and next year I'll be making this money, I think having that kind of a framing and helping them understand what these are the risks. But if you're able to pay this off, you're going to graduate by next year, this is what it will mean for you. I think these are complex conversations. These are also, you know, I mean, any financial conversation can become quite complex, especially with, you know, the higher ed sector. But I'll tell you, our financial aid folks are very good at this. And they do try to send this message, but it's kind of like, you know, how much, you also don't want to push people too much toward, you know, you're always trying to strike that balance, right? You don't want to be somebody pushing, always pushing people toward loans. So you're trying to strike that balance, but I do agree with you because, again, financially, I feel like any student who's committing to a college education, the sacrifice you're making is time. The sacrifice you're making for money is not big here at the University of West Georgia, right? I mean, in absolute terms, at a relative level, of course, depending on the individual situation. But the main thing is time, because the money will be recouped very quickly. Within a couple of years, you would have recouped that money, right? So we are very good at that. But it is the time. And as long as we can make them feel that their time is, number one, well spent in terms of they're getting value from their classes and so on. And number two, honestly, that it's also a good time. It's a fun time. It's an enjoyable time, right? I mean, the kind of experiences many of us have had in our undergraduate days, where you know that this is, you know, it is fun to be on campus. It's fun to participate in these activities. And in the process, in that fun, you learn so many other skills of leadership, of competing with other people, and so on. So I feel like if we can position that and keep focusing on this is what your time means here, and then at the same time, the financial picture, giving them a balance, like these are the pros and cons, but there are lots of pros. So, you know, kind of make that choice for yourself. I think that will go a long way.
Thank you.
But thanks for that comment. Any other questions, comments? And I know John Preston will talk about a few more things too. But... All right, thank you, and I'll have John add a few other things.
Thank you, Tony. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to always start by thanking you for your service on the Faculty Senate. This is, you know, dedicated time you all have represented each of your academic areas, and I appreciate your leadership. But I'm going to go back to the last couple of weeks, start of the spring semester. Hopefully you had a fabulous holiday and were able to kind of rejuvenate, but we all know in the room that faculty never stop. We're 24/7. We're like that Energizer bunny back in the day, right? Just keeps going and going and going. And I know that even over holiday, you were probably reading, still checking email, right? We saw some of those going around, tried to tamp that down, but you're always prepping, getting ready for the next class. And so I want to affirm that and the work that you do. And that's even evident right before, you know, officially we're on contract January 2nd, and the classes didn't start again for another week or so. But even with the snow day, anybody actually take a snow day? You'll notice the mailing that came out, it just said work remote, because, you know, post-COVID, you know, used to be, you'd go make a snowman and you'd have a good time, right? But we're still working, we're still leaning in, and in particular that Friday where we did get some snow on the ground, it was lovely, enjoyed it. My family made a snow pond because we're nerds like that, we play chess. So hopefully you were able to construct something, and what was amazing is it stuck around. And that's a nice metaphor, because faculty and staff at UWG stick around. We're gonna make this work. We're gonna still advise. And I hinted at that with the question around, you know, what are we doing around students to reclaim them? Eligible but not, you know, not enrolled. And right up through that Friday, we had program coordinators and faculty and advising that were reaching out, calling, emailing, and saying, hey, buy the books. You should be in classes. What's going on? And really working with, and you all do that in unique ways. Advising does that, financial aid does that, enrollment management. We all have a role to play, but it's significant and it doesn't stop. And even earlier this week, with work remote on both campuses, and then work remote on Noonan, and all of well, is the shuttle running, and, you know, is the road safe, and all of that, a flurry of emails. I'm sure you were fielding those questions for students that maybe lived in Noonan and couldn't get up to Carrollton, or lived wherever that was impacted. And so I appreciate your flexibility in working with them. And if you've still got students that are, you know, not literally digging out, but this snow stuck around for a while, right? This is odd to see snow on the beach in Pensacola. Anybody see these things on social media, right? It was wild. But we roll with it. We're flexible. And I think that that's also evident in the agenda. I mean, 344 pages on the agenda today. So I know you were busy this week, and UPC and GPC. One of the things that's, I think, the coolest on the agenda today is looking at the policy around academic appeal, grade appeal. And we've got that process. We want to make sure that students can have their voice, but also that faculty can make their case and say, here's why this grade is appropriate. That back and forth takes a while, and it's deep conversation. But you'll notice in that final appendix that we're shortening that, and that we're not doing that lightly. And I appreciate the work and the thought that's gone into that. Yes, we want to be responsive to students because they're trying to get in the next class, and it might be a prerequisite. Or maybe it impacts their financial aid because of GPA, and maybe they, you know, earned a C, but they think they should get an A, or maybe they earned a C and no one's ever really said, oh, I think I should get a lower grade, right? But these debates happen, and I want to point out that the modification that's recommended to Faculty Senate today in compressing that requires us to work faster, work deeper, and be responsive. And it's important, though, that this doesn't come for free. It takes attention and it takes time. But I think that that's really indicative, similar to people working on the Friday that was a snow day, and earlier this week, that we lean in and do the hard thing. And I commend you for that. That's really important. Yes, it's going to take some effort. It's going to take some additional work and compress that time. But it does matter to students, and holding on to them and getting them to that retention and that graduation that Shwani just spoke to. Little things like that make a big difference. So it's an important change there. So I've got a couple of updates and happy to take questions as well. Since we met at the last Faculty Senate, we've got a new Dean of Nursing, Imelda Reyes. So glad that she's with us now. If you haven't met her, I hope that you do soon. And we are still working on the Dean of Library search. That we should have on-campus finalists in the next few weeks. So look for those announcements to come out, and I hope that you'll participate. Please encourage your faculty to have voice throughout that process. Looking ahead into the upcoming academic year, because yes, we just kicked off spring semester, but we're that Energizer Bunny. We keep going, right? We're already looking at summer, we're looking at fall, and into the upcoming academic year, we've got 2 interim deans in CHAS and in CMCS that will be launching those dean searches in the coming year and going through that process of making sure that faculty are leading those searches. So more to come there. But speaking of summer and fall, over the break and really right after Thanksgiving, we really started building out that summer and fall schedule. In particular, fall with the new time and date patterns that we've worked on for the last 2 years, we're now implementing that in fall 25. And I really commend the folks for, deep dive in conversation around, should we offer these classes Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, morning, afternoon, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which is a really interesting conversation because, a lot of folks don't want to be in class and students, back to the point of, working. But leaning in on that on campus, the student that is in housing and has a meal plan, first year students and building out some possible Monday, Wednesday, Friday, block schedules. So take your English at 9, take your math at 10, take your poli-sci at 1 o'clock that afternoon, and encourage that vitality, different opportunities there. No mandate, no requirement, but I appreciate those conversations that program coordinators, faculty, deans, chairs are having around that. And we will be launching that. March 1st is when the schedule goes live. So we'll be publishing that out. And my ask is that we don't have any TBA, right? Students need to know who's teaching, faculty need to know who's teaching, and what are the times and what are the locations. Historically, we would list the location as TBA. Not that, TLP or Richards or Boyd, right? That may or may not make a difference to somebody, but it's important that we don't then have to change the schedule when we build out the physical location and say, gosh, yeah, that 11 a.m. Tuesday, Thursday doesn't work because we've got no space left. That's been an issue in the past, and we're going to build that out and reduce that chaos and that change after the classes have been published. Additionally, it's respectful to faculty to know what they're teaching in the fall so they can do prep. And if you're on contract, if you're off contract in summer and you're not teaching, then I hope you're doing grand things and enjoying that time. It's not necessarily fair to faculty. I know we all do it, but that prep in summer, you should know what you're teaching and get some of that prep going in the spring. Be respectful of people's time there and give advanced notice. But that also ties into summer. One of the questions that Dylan passed on to me was, what about summer and proration and who gets to teach what? We do need to continue proration because we can't lose money in small classes. That said, for the last, every summer for the last 4 summers, there's always a conversation that can happen. So if a class is smaller and it needs to be offered and we need to compensate based on the content or this is required for graduation, please raise that with your chair and with your dean. And I'm happy to have those conversations. We do the spreadsheet, we do the analysis. Another element of this that came up in the question was the equity. And does it, is there an inequity around, well, I get to teach a larger class, but you might be teaching a smaller class, and who gets to do that assignment? The chairs and the deans are responsible for that scheduling, but it should always be guided with equitable access for all faculty. So if you see an issue there, please raise that and have that conversation. Again, very open to having that conversation with you if we need to. The other element of that is, are we spread too thin? And are we offering too many sections? Maybe not enough in the spring and more in the summer or vice versa. We're really efficient in course offerings, and we've done a lot of work to make that really work for students and capitalize on course caps. The growth that we're seeing requires additional sections, and revisiting that in summer is important. But if we've got too many opportunities for students in the summer, maybe we can condense that, and that would drive enrollment, higher enrollment in fewer sections. That said, it's a conversation around what's appropriate, what's needed. And the modality in summer is dominantly online. Don't expect that to change because students are traveling, they're working, that's a very different atmosphere than that full push lean into on campus in fall and spring. So there is a difference there. We do have some on-campus courses, but as you know, historically, that's a very different look from the academic year. A couple other points very quickly, and then I'll take questions. The common course components, we've done a lot of work in that in the last year. One of the elements that came up at the last Faculty Senate meeting was, well, what about this text or email to students that's reminding them that the assignment is due the next day? We don't want them to get that 0 because they forgot to turn something in. I've shared my undergraduate experience of missing a test just because I was, out of it for a day. And the grace of the faculty member to allow me to sit down and take it immediately. We don't want people in that situation. So reminding them in a supportive way. In the same way, faculty, grades are due, congrats, 2 days before the grades are to be entered, then a friendly reminder, emphasis on friendly. It's not cops and robbers, it's not policing, it's not, big brother looking over your shoulder, it's just a reminder. And anyone ever get this reminder about final grades being keyed into the system and you thought you hit submit, but you didn't? Same idea, right? How many times have we actually done the grading and thought we keyed it in and it just wasn't there? The timing of that, what does it mean? What's the deadline for faculty response to students? Similar to the academic appeals process, we want that to be as compressed as possible. It's good pedagogy to give feedback as quickly as possible. But there's also a humanity side of it and giving people time to process and do that deep, rich feedback necessary. So that's defined locally. And I'm really excited that this semester we have pilots, faculty who volunteered to say, I want to try this out. I want to see how this works in my class across all of the colleges and schools. And we'll look at that and bring it before Faculty Senate. My hypothesis is that in May, we'll see deeper engagement. We'll see better student outcomes and performance in classes just because of that support. It's not a silver bullet. As you know, good teaching and rich learning is multi-dimensional, but this is just one more tool in our arsenal to help students be successful. And I want to reemphasize that we are piloting this. Hope to expand it in fall, but lots of discussions to come on that. Last thing I'll share is, and you see it in some of the agenda today, the revamping and the currency of academic programs. I commend philosophy, geology, geography, looking at environmental and earth science and some of the work that, really it's across the board. You all are looking at maintaining currency and relevance, continuously updating academic programs. And in the process of looking at that Earth and Environmental Sciences program, sharing a prelim of that with the system office, because it's really taking geosciences, geology and geography and creating a new academic program out of that. Part of that process was looking at the program map for those and displaying what that looks like. The system office was so impressed with the work that those faculty had done that they wanted to adopt that as a template for all 26 institutions across the USG. So I want to leave you with that and just say, you're doing great work. It's tough, even when the snow is beckoning you outside to go play in the winter wonderland, you're doing the hard work. And I appreciate it. The system office sees it, and great things to come for the rest of this semester and going forward. My offer, as we discussed last semester, I'm going to be meeting with academic units and building out what that looks like to hear directly from you, not at a college or school level, but really visiting across this calendar year, every single academic area, and hearing what do you need, what's working well, what do we need to change, what support do you need? So look for those invitations to come out shortly. And if you've got an individual question or you'd like to, address that now, happy to. If you want to follow up, we can do that one-on-one. And if you want to do that over chess, I've got some boards in my office, so happy to do that with you. Any questions on any of that or anything else? Well, please reach out if something strikes you and you've got inspiration in the next few minutes. Dylan, we've got the big agenda, so let's get to it. Thank you all.
Great, everyone. So before we move into some of our other business, I wanted to give you some updates from the executive committee. We have kind of a major project that we're taking on this semester. So at our last executive meeting of last semester, I asked all committee chairs to just go ahead and take a look at our existing committee structure, a hard look at it. Give me some feedback on how can we revise charges for individual committees and how can we think about restructuring the whole thing to modernize, increase efficiency, simplify, consolidate as necessary. And part of this goes back to our bigger conversation about helping to ease some of the service burden that we all face across campus. So we have a role in that as a Senate. So I want to give you all an update on that. That's going to be an ongoing project this semester. Based on the feedback I got from the committee chairs, I developed a draft revision to our committee structure. We went over that last Friday at our executive committee meeting that resulted in some more revisions to that draft. I've shared that with all committee chairs, and my ask to them was to meet with their existing committees over the next month or so. Go over that draft, gather some feedback on it. So we can ultimately, it's a draft, ultimately incorporate some feedback and make it better. With the goal of being able to get a new committee structure through governance by the end of this semester. So any changes that we do make are going to have to go through our existing rules committee. They're gonna have to go through us as a Senate, and it would ultimately have to be voted on by the general faculty. So I'm hopeful that we can get all that done this semester. Just to give you some cliff notes, again, your committee chairs should have maybe have already, or if not, they will be very soon sharing this with you, and you'll need to talk about it. But the highlight punchlines are, we have 11 standing committees now. This proposal will take us down to 8 without losing any functions. So we reduce committees, but I think if anything, we actually gain some jurisdiction, some areas of responsibilities. The intent is to not lose any functions. So in going from 11 to 8 and some of the other changes, we would reduce a total of 32 service positions, committee positions that would not have to be filled by our colleagues all across campus. So that would put a dent in our service burden all across campus. So I'm happy to take discussion on that if you want, but my advice would be start in the small groups, and that's my intent, is with your committees now, go over the thing, talk about it. Any suggested revisions, as an executive committee, we're gonna try and incorporate those. I will say just up front, we're a big group that is revising these documents. So it isn't necessarily going to be the case that the final document's going to be perfect in any individual's eyes. But my commitment is, and I know my colleagues on exec, our commitment is we're going to do the best we can to try and get the best product that we can get from this. Okay. All right. So with that, I want to give a chance to any committee chairs if they have anything they want to share. Amy?
The Faculty Development Committee has drafted a revised faculty emeritus policy to be included in the UWG Faculty Handbook. Provost reviewed that policy this summer and gave some very helpful suggestions. I think we're close to having a final draft, but we're seeking feedback from the faculty before we vote on this policy in April. So I'll be emailing the draft out to senators, and I ask that you please inform your colleagues about this policy. The weeks are long, but the years are short. So I think faculty emeritus policy, which seems so far away, may be something that means something to you sooner than later. So if you could get that feedback to me by March 3rd, we've got a couple of weeks then to incorporate it and get it on the Senate agenda for April. Thank you.
Any other committee chairs or anything they'd like to share? Updates? Okay, so we'll move through the formal agenda. We'll start with UPC. Jim?
UPC submitted 8 action items for approval. And we received no questions in advance. If anybody has any questions now. Okay. Looks like we're ready to vote then. So all in favor of these 8 action items from UPC, if you'll raise your hand. And thank you. Any opposed? Or abstaining? Thank you, everybody.
All right, so you can go ahead. Move on to UPC.
GPC had 9 items for approval. There were no questions received in advance. Are there any questions? I have not like to call to a vote. All in favor of the 9 items submitted for GPC? Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Thank you.
The APC.
So next up, sorry. Next up is APC, so I can call up Erica. And this is a more specific change, so we're actually going to go into a little bit more detail here.
Okay.
So this refers to the, what Dr. Preston was talking about, the grade appeal, a policy revision on it, just to kind of clean it up, make it more modern, make it a little bit of a tighter timeline so that students don't lose the momentum. So I'm just gonna read the revisions up here. The main revisions reflected in the revised document involve the length of time in which students would have to initiate a grade appeal and the time frame for completing the process. Under the proposed process, students would have 1 month from the date on which the final grades in the course were due for that, to initiate an appeal, versus the end of the following semester. And then the appeal would be concluded 2 months after the assignment of the grade versus 12 months. So the revisions also are also updated to include all venues in which UWG classes are offered, so Noonan, E-Core, E-Major, and those types of things. The 2 types of grade appeals in which students can apply for are not changing. It's just kind of streamlining everything else a little bit. I didn't receive any questions beforehand, so should I open the floor for questions now first? Then I think we're ready to vote, so all in favor? All opposed? Any abstain? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you all. So what I hope to do with the time that we have left, and this is building off some of the conversations that we have already had. I think all of us, especially all of us who have been here for a while, we recognize to a large degree what the president is talking about, that there is a need to reinvigorate our campus life. I think many of us recognize pre-2020 to now, for various reasons that probably aren't just the pandemic. I think the college situation is more complex. We don't necessarily have to have that conversation. Let's focus on solutions, but the campus isn't what it used to be. So the president has talked about this a lot. What I hope we can do as representatives of the faculty is let's have a faculty-centered conversation around this issue. Some of the context for this is many of us in our conversations with our colleagues and with our leaders, unfortunately, in the context of the campus presence conversation, it's easy to focus on negative examples of faculty campus presence. It's easy to focus on, so we all could name colleagues that maybe are problematic for campus presence, right? And unfortunately, I think some of our leaders could do that as well. But what I want to do, and this was sparked by a senator came to me after the meeting and started me thinking down this path. How can we flip the conversation to shine a light on the many more numerous examples of colleagues who just nail it? They have really robust student engagement. They're on campus. They're doing really cool things off campus with our students. I think that's a really important one that some of our leaders at exec shared last week. So student engagement is in all its forms, but especially on campus for a lot of reasons, right? We have a lot of buildings on campus that need people in it, for example. How can we shift the conversation from if the conversation goes to campus presence, immediately you're like, oh, well, this is problematic for campus presence. Instead of that being front of mind, being look at all of these really cool faculty that are modeling awesome campus presence. How do we make that front of mind? How do we elevate that in the conversation? So in addition to that, how do we, as an institution, as faculty, how do we incentivize that? If this goal is like, we want more robust campus presence, we want more in-person classes, we want more time spent on campus, we want faculty showing up to athletic events, whatever the case may be. What can we do to incentivize that? What can we do to facilitate it? What can we do to reward it? The flip side also matters. We also need to have the conversation about what barriers are standing in the way to this. What do we have to overcome? What, as faculty, can we facilitate overcoming, how can we break down barriers and how can we recognize the faculty we can't, and there are barriers that we need help breaking down. Let's have that conversation as well. So what I hope we can do with the time we have left, and what I want to challenge you to do is to continue the conversation beyond what we just have left. So as faculty leaders, what I hope is let's drive a campus conversation on this topic. I want to think about, in very concrete terms, actionable ideas. What can we do as faculty to help solve some of these problems and elevate and positively reinforce what we all want to see? So before I get to next steps, I want to ask, does what I'm saying so far make sense? Has this problem been laid out? Yes.
Does the barriers committee that used to exist still exist?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, that could be, yeah, that's my knowledge. Yes, maybe that could be something we can do that. So, okay, so now that we described the problem, what I hope maybe we could do is let's spend maybe 20 minutes or so. Let's start the conversation in small groups. Start with your neighbors. If you want to write some things down and pass them to me, but I want to make sure we can come back together as a group and air some of these, get some things in the minutes that we can share. But let's take at least maybe 20 minutes, start the dialogue with your neighbors, and we can come back together, and as a group, we will air out some ideas that we have. All sound good? All right, thank you all.
I'll tell you, we get out my students that it's so great. Like, you come about volleyball games here. I mean, right now, like, so I know volleyball specifically, they have this one game this season where they like recognize Scott Creek. I think it's all that, like, that, but if they did, it's hard to say no, like, it's so hard to say no. It's just kind of and you're like, yes, be there.
Yeah, I don't want to go down. I don't want to be a, I don't want to be involved in a debate that, like there'd be a call center, like you might get a check mark, like this.
But what if this came up with you come to my the choir thing or my band's playing? I mean, absolutely. It's hard to say. But it was spectacular, and I'm so glad because my brain. So it's like.
So it's one of those things where the game outside of just.
Let's get back to my Zoom. Is you get free access to the gym and stuff. I guess we're not giving it time to I don't think.
It's like a 30.
I think great with the student experience like that, so they don't know they complete that. They don't
But then on the other side. Yeah.
Highlight small things they're having. Very Nick and I was part of a small like. It's hardly know that that's way our students were getting. Right, not even research.
There's also.
We're already doing my thing. Feedback and the opportunity to get feedback and your analysis evaluated against different years.
And then now it will.
I think the point there, the PhD documents, the discussion that happens in the review committees.
It is. Yeah, it's the first time I've been involved in that sort of thing. Experience. And then I was people talk about.
Here is what the thing we need to do to get up there. Good. That's why it was for. The publications is good. That's a culture. So to the point, I don't think it's supposed to be it is about what quality, right? And how
you start to.
yeah. Because you know, my key. Yes. But I think like, how do you stop this?
If they want. On your. Actually, I have.
So then, you know, this is intervening by not. Just now, notice oh my gosh, thank you so much for your time. You didn't actually, you know, and then just keep it. Yeah, I mean, that's it's a valid point there, because I've got my own box, and we're now limited to academic affairs, right? You got one fairly last on Monday morning, the general, the continuing Richard Knight, athletics, it's like.
Yeah.
I think you're tired. You're tired on me.
Check mark so it doesn't all move crazy.
Yes, Contract.
I know it is, but I haven't talked to you. I mean, I'm just kind of. No, I didn't know that. Yeah, it's a very good question. So we have that. But think about it, we didn't even do that.
And in my, when it comes to UCM. I think one issue is UCM's role involved in. They are the platform, right? You got all your materials together, you let them to go out, you grab it. Into them, and they'll do the final proof of it, and okay, then something that is. Hey, we have this thing going on.
I love this stuff. That's me, that's the entire point of the group that you guys have. We give our students who are trying to, they have some institutions. So you're not wasting your time. And they're using your time students with this campaign marketing is so. How that's.
We've got two to study. Formalize marketing. How it's stuff. You say what happened.
Just stand there.
Yeah.
All right, folks, if you don't mind, we can bring us back together here. All right, so I want to have an opportunity that we can share your best ideas, but before we do that, and maybe get lost in it, I want to reiterate anything at all that you have shared today that doesn't come up and then kind of make it onto Laura's computer. Feel free to either just hand it to me before we leave or send it to me via email. And I will make sure that either as a faculty side through executive committee or by sending it to our administrators, I will make sure it doesn't just go nowhere. So, all right, who wants to start off? Best ideas. I heard some good ones, so I can always call on people. Please.
We just thought, we talk about incentivizing, but maybe just, doing more to invest in faculty, and it can be in small ways. So we talked about, maybe once a month, once a week at Dine West, that there are discounted days for faculty that encourage them to gather there. One thing that the IFE has been asking for quite some time is, a more inviting space. Right now we're in the basement of old auditorium, and we make the best of it, but we would love to have space that we share. I know, no offense, and Corey Maggiano wants our space too, so when we leave, he'll throw a party.
No, you're the best neighbor, and I'm rooting for you, but I'll very much miss you.
But we would love some space, and if this is important to faculty, but I've worked with Brian Mosher and RSP, and we kind of have these visions of creating almost like a faculty lounge, like a place where faculty can just come, make a cup of coffee, have their lunch. We want to create, like a little writing room, because we know you have your offices, but we also know people bother you there a lot. So giving you another, little space to kind of retreat sometimes. So if that's something, I would like to put that out here. I've been asking administration for it. It's not that they're not supportive. Space is tight on campus. But that was something that we wanted. We also talked about, or we thought of, we also talked about, how emphasizing how faculty participation in events on campus, whether they be sporting events or other, student events, maybe could be seen as service. When we talk with the faculty academy, participants, one of the bits of advice we give them early on is do what you love for service. Like if you don't want to do faculty senate, you don't have to. Like there are other things you can do. So finding what you enjoy doing, it feels less like work and it still counts. But what might be helpful is if it was coming from the administrators to the deans to the chairs and that was being emphasized to faculty as they're working on dossiers, promotion tenure and annual reviews, that kind of participation in campus events matters, where it counts. And then one thing that I've always tried to do, and we've had some success with it, but we've tried to do like tailgating events at football games. And I feel bad because I haven't done much for basketball, but I really love football. And so it was easier for me to get in touch with the athletic department and get free tickets and parking spaces and set up tailgate spaces. And even faculty who I consider friends, and I would say, come on out, we'll be out there with the boys, like come hang out. And they're like, not giving an ounce more, no more of my time can go to work stuff, and so that's the workload. I know Jason, we were talking about this a little bit earlier in TLA committee, the workload issue in general, I think has to be addressed. We really want to see a culture shift there. So we'll keep doing the events and maybe there are other ways we can, do things so faculty can gather. But yeah, Kevin.
So, I mean, just to emphasize that a little bit more, if we can actually say, right, to chairs and deans, this could go a service, because there's much more to university than sitting on a bank, right? Because most committees are utter poetry, not most. Knowing that I'm chair is utter poetry, but obviously I didn't do a chair, but I mean, it's more fun and it does make the university more vibrant. And so right, you're still so right, because I didn't sit on the one-legged zebra committee, right? People meet once and everyone had their cameras on. I was there at a couple of events and a guest lecture on Friday, or guest lecture on an evening, on Wednesday evening. Put that down, bang, you get rewarded, and it's more fun to stay on committee.
Yeah.
Well,
Go ahead.
Just to make sure that this actually is recorded properly, I want, so it sounds to me concrete ways that we are counting, you're going to an athletic event, you're going to a preview day, you're going to whatever, that is service. And you don't have to be on any committees, if you're just, you go to every basketball game, football game, like that's gonna check the box, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And make it, make it free.
Yeah.
I love to.
I love to support my, I've got tons of student athletes, I want to support them all. I can't afford to go and spend, no offense, but $10 a ticket for every football game, volleyball game, softball game.
But we are, the athletic department is doing free tickets, for faculty, for athletic department. There's free tickets for faculty.
Well, I've seen it twice a semester, right? Where you have to get into a lottery and then they call you your ticket.
It's not that, yeah, but we can work on that. But yeah, I've worked with athletics on that. They're definitely willing to work with us. They just want us there. Yeah, they give us a bunch of parking spots.
So at minimum, it sounds like we need more communication or more something, which there are free tickets or. So in some way, look to incentivize financially going to these things, in addition to incentivize professionally to go to these things.
So I just wanted to mention, because we had a similar discussion about incentivization. And one of the things that we talked about was that yes, service, but not always only service. And that's the thing that ends up happening for a lot of colleagues that I talk with that have their service filled a third of the way through a given term or a year or whatever. They're 200% or 300% service. So I don't think there's a reason why co-curricular activities that you build, also just to put on, I guess on a fine print thing, it would always be different to go and support a thing or to build it, right? And so that tiered structure, it should be represented in all of our promotion and tenure guidelines. But what I found, and what a lot of people that in my situation have found, is that when you build, a bunch of research experiences for your students that don't have to do with class in your lab, for example, if this can count towards your professional development, towards student success in professional development, this is a different thing. You will have young faculty chomping at the bit to do just that. And they will make the argument, they have to make the argument that what they built is equivalent to or part of similar to a publication or part of similar to a workshop that they attended or. I think that that case needs to be able to be made, but it needs to also be visible to administration. Then you will have more co-curricular on-campus events sponsored by faculty. Because if it all chucks into service, that's where you're getting your, that's where you're getting your people who are like, no, I can't do it anymore, I too much.
So yeah, reframe, so not just counting as service, finding ways to make these things count in whatever way is going to most benefit.
Yeah, whatever category it's in, right? I could create co-curriculars that are clearly about teaching. I could create co-curriculars that are clearly about research. I could create co-curriculars that are service to my campus and community.
And I like that idea, you know, instead of maybe publications or in that research and scholarship, which increasingly is becoming so hard for faculty to do because they're teaching such heavy loads to do. You know, but teaching and then doing some of these co-curriculars, you know, maybe that counts instead of, you know, having to have a publication even, you know, so what kind of flexibility could be worked in there?
What would happen if we would turn some of this on its head and do things like the faculty versus students basketball and finding the faculty players to actually do a basketball game? Or faculty day with the band, and anybody who plays an instrument or hasn't for 30 years and wants to come and try to play with the band, play with the band on that day. I mean, that way you're interacting with students is free, but in a different way than just being in a bleacher as phenomenal.
So I think before I take another, I think that goes to my idea. What I hope happens over the next couple months is we can drive the conversation all across campus in our units and just in our peer groups. Because we know, I have a colleague who's actually really good at basketball or plays an instrument or something like that. And maybe encourage them to find a way to kind of do that for schools or something. So that's stuff like that's what I'm hoping happens. So
Oh, I'm just gonna add, I think there's a disconnect between great things that are taking place in student affairs and how that is communicated to faculty. For example, I've been on campus 8 years. I've been engaged in first year initiatives, undergraduate stuff. Took my niece on a tour, like, I don't know this place at all. I had no idea we had a rear closet where students could get fresh attire, free headshots, free laundry service in residence halls. I think there should be more communication about all the things that are available to students. So when we're having those discussions, we're advocating for the value proposition to live on campus. We can speak to those resources, things that are available all the time.
I think that's great. If you don't mind, I just want to follow up. If it's a communication piece, what's your sense of, if you need to let me know later, that's fine, but what's your sense of might be the best avenue for communication between that division and us? Because sometimes you hear, well, email, maybe that's not an ideal solution. Should those come through chairs or deans or? So it seems, I get it, it does seem like we have that part of campus and it can be in a silo and sometimes hard. How do we do that communication? Do you have any sense of that?
Sure, I don't like this from the admission presentation. I wish they could come to our colleges or departments to share what's.
Or give us the preview day Hoover, if they do.
That's good. Yeah. So we're not talking about email communication. Well, you know, we're talking about like come to our department meetings, type communication, talk to us about that. Okay, yeah, so more robust connections between what enrollment management, what the student affairs, what they're up to, and person to person. Yeah, cool. Please.
We had a thought about, this was from the student side, the issue brought up about how many of our students work. So I don't know if this might not even be around the possibility, but would it be possible to create more campus-based jobs for students that would make them still part of campus life? So that they're not taking jobs outside of campus, but they're actually like part of the campus community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something with the QEP, the quality enhancement plan on career readiness, experiential learning. We have QEP monies, and so we're talking about how those could possibly be directed towards students and free up more their time to be on campus.
We guys have raised their salaries for that.
There's that issue too, so right now, there's an issue with student workers and how many positions are available and how well paid they are, because they can go to McDonald's.
That's right.
So I think one thing we could convey as a matter of faculty senate record is the idea that not only do we need campus jobs, if they're gonna work, let's try and find ways so that they work here. I think it's also important that we get in the record, we need to find ways to convey to our leadership that we need to pay them competitively, so that they'll actually take the jobs that we pay.
Couldn't do that for us.
So then we can actually do it to live in Carrollton.
That's
a big part of our conversation.
Yes, please, so if you don't mind, then we can follow up on that, because that came up in multiple groups of members, please.
It was brought up that there are many faculty who are living with roommates or
Some.
some,
Not a whole lot.
not a whole lot, but or living in Alabama or basically because Carrollton is not affordable. And so we're talking about the barrier of even getting people to come to campus because Carrollton is not currently like a vibrant community in a lot of ways. But how could we also how could we kind of make that easier in some ways? And one of those might be giving faculty dorm access for somebody who I know. I could feel the wave of, I don't know the students, I feel that, but if somebody is driving a crazy amount and they needed someplace to stay for 3 or 4 minutes during the week. That might be great access, yeah, but none of us knew that.
Yeah.
And so we don't know that that's a thing that you could do.
That's
generally. And we were also talking about how we get people interested in the community, kind of in both directions. And so one of those things might be inviting chefs from, we could certainly go to Atlanta and that kind of thing, but doing kind of a, what is that called? Taste of Carrollton, but at the Z6. Something like that. So that would introduce students to different places in the community. They may not always be able to go to the square until we get the rate. That would also, maybe introduce some new professors, new colleagues to what we have in Carrollton. It would also bring in maybe the community. To see what we offer.
Yeah, so I think. Yes, so we need to get a couple distinct things there. One of those, before I forget, is. I love the idea of finding ways to. Increase the connections between our students and our faculty on campus and our staff on campus and the community. So bringing some of those community events on campus. Also, I think can help us solve some of the problems of what do we do with space on days like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So I think that's awesome to convey up. The other thing is I heard from multiple groups, Jason brought it up in exec last week, the idea of where faculty live is huge. So let's make sure that we're conveying that up in the records that whether it's incentives to help people live in Carrollton, whether it's communicating out opportunities better. Maybe it's even as, like, say, we can't actually provide concrete incentives, maybe some office on campus can do a better way of communicating. When an affordable opportunity in Carrollton comes up, then we help facilitate communicating that out to the faculty. But where people live is a gigantic benefit. I can tell you, I'm schooled, I was 5 minutes away. I always live 5 minutes away. It makes a gigantic difference. So if we can find ways to help with that, and I recognize, if you've been here 20 years, you love the place, the far away you drive. Maybe you're not gonna change, but if we're thinking long term, which we are, the conversation that the president's driving is a long term one. We start thinking about bringing in new faculty, maybe there could be some financial incentives to say you get these incentives if you
We're
bring.
coming for brand new faculty to campus in the interview.
Yeah.
It's kind of just like, we want engagement on campus, but we just need you to trust us. I mean, that's.
Yeah. Please.
We didn't talk about this specifically in our group, but the mentioning of Taste of Carrollton brings up a really good point that Carrollton has several signature events. One of which I've been involved with planning for the last several years is the Carrollton Half Marathon. It literally runs through campus. How many spectators on campus are there? 2. One is Alice Young, she gives out popsicles to people, and another is her friend. That's it. So anyway, that's the negative part of it. I had a really productive conversation with someone who works with campus and student engagement, and basically this year, I'm like, this is enough. We're making it a thing where campus is like, we're bringing campus and we're trying to bring the city and campus together in that. But it shouldn't take some random faculty member to just go, why aren't we doing this? Like that should be coming from the top down. Obviously, they're doing a lot of other conversations too. But so if anyone's interested in trying to like get engagement going with the city and students and maybe your own division for that, that's something we're planning now. That would be September. But it literally just took an email. And hey, there's literally going to be 500 people running to this campus, and this is a huge missed opportunity every year. Can we change this? And immediately got a response. People were so happy to talk about it. So you just have to like say your ideas.
Yeah, so we have role in communication too, I think.
Yeah.
So on that front, I want to, our time is short and I want to make sure I give a minute to Jeff to talk about something. Before I do that, I want to say two things. Number one, if you have other ideas on this, today in the future, please share those with me and I will make sure that something happens with them. But my challenge to you and your colleagues is if you have views on this that you have the power to do something about, I want to challenge us all to do something about it. Our leaders have a role, collectively we have a role, but as individuals we have roles too. Jeff, he has it, he's doing something.
Oh, yeah, just this happens to coincide beautifully with something I'm doing with Provost and want to encourage you to participate in if you like, which is a brown bag lunch every other week that will be focusing on student faculty interactions. How to celebrate what faculty are doing, how to get expertise from you and share that and cross-pollinate that with other colleagues. So it's another way to both sort of make what we do already known to people, like we talk about the positive things people are doing, but really to help each other and develop some best practices about how we can have faculty-student interaction really be impactful, both in person and in online teaching, which I think is an interesting area yet to be sort of tapped or at least understood. So the announcement's coming out about that, but if you want to participate or you have expertise and you want to share it or you just want to help organize it with me, come talk to me real quick after and let me get your name and we'll make sure that you're included. Oh, and the provost is going to provide some funding for food. I mean, come on.
I mean, literally, our first words were M&Ms and coffee.
What's that?
Our first words in this group were M&Ms and coffee. Yeah, we're.
All right, thank you all. That's no formal adjournment today. Thank you.
And I'm just like, it's nice to have it.
I'm well. I'm not. Okay. I'm from Missouri originally. Kind of, I mean, it's kind of Midwest, it's a little bit, I'm from southern Missouri, so it does get cold in the winter early. But it's nothing like I lived in Chicago for 5 years. And it's nothing Came with the climate.
Thanks, Dylan.
On campus, when Tim Hines was proposed, he left in 2009. So he used to walk around campus and but I was very young. It's really hardly. But to make it a point to show up on or otherwise would have been a very that I think helps schools to it's a different mindset, and I think COVID made it difficult. Now we are past COVID, how we do nice. What is the tasteful way of training? It will be safe to all administrators. Please show up and make I can, if there is a contact, you know, providing comments and yeah, you know, it's happening in a positive way that is not complaining. Finite, but I think it helps with administrative more engaged and then you know I can listen to people that will Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you, sir.
Are you happy with the emeritus? I know you had a lot of.
Well, we don't know yet because I have to look at the policy.
We're closed.